Welcome to The Parts Truth, the podcast where the nuts and bolts of the home service world come together. I am your host, Scott Pierson, and each week we dive into the real stories, the trends, the truths behind the trades. From the shifting tides of the economy and supply chain challenges to what homeowners need to know before making big investments in their homes. Whether you're in the industry or you're just trying to make smarter choices for your home, we're here to break it all down. No fluff, just facts. So grab your coffee, tighten your tool belt, and let's get into it. Welcome back. So I'm lucky enough to be in the presence of Ruchir Shah, founder of SkillCat this week. Ruchir, welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Glad to have you as well. So I've been talking with several people over the past couple weeks about really the state of the industry, and we've talked a lot over the past 5 or 6 years about there's a skilled labor shortage coming. I think we might have overestimated the timeline because we're not seeing necessarily the economics of it play out today. But we do know from a data standpoint that about 40% of really HVAC technicians in the trade today are due for retirement in the next 5 years. So that being a big number, it opens up a big shift. What do you think that does to the industry as a whole? What are your first thoughts on that?
Anytime you're trying to do anything for your home, prices have already started shooting up, and that's going to get higher and higher. So I think the end user is already feeling some of the ramifications of the shortage, and it's only going to get worse.
That's a great point. Pricing is a big indicator of supply and demand of labor, right? So yeah, I think your point is pretty spot on, that really since 2020 we've seen prices, especially in HVAC, start to creep up on repair and replacement.
Yeah. And I think it's only going to get worse. So these jobs are, the nice thing about supply and demand, these jobs are only going to get better and more enticing for the next generation because there's such a shortage, and they're going to have to pass those prices on to consumers. But yeah, I guess to answer your question, we're already seeing it. So like in so many companies, like almost every company is supply constrained, right? So they're getting tons and tons of bids for jobs and opportunities. There's a lot of demand for their services, but they just don't have enough people to actually go out and put those jobs in. And where you saw this first is when we got started a couple of years ago, a lot of companies were still trying to hire experienced techs for pretty much every role. And they were starting to run into issues where they can't find people experienced, right? It's just not possible. And then you run into the problem that a lot of these companies, because they've gotten used to hiring experienced techs, they no longer have apprenticeship programs, no longer have training, no longer have a structure or setup for hiring apprentices and green techs to the industry. And so what we've seen over the past couple of years is that kind of leading indicator of the shortage is, hey, no more experienced techs are available. And now folks are starting to build out those pipelines and invest in how do you get more green techs into the industry and how do you grow them effectively so they start producing.
So let's unpack that for a second. So SkillCat's kind of on the forefront of changing the way training can be delivered to a different generation of technicians. Because I remember back in the day, it was, okay, you've gotten through the journeyman program, you've gotten through your apprenticeship, and education meant you got to take a couple of days off to go back to a classroom and hit the books, hit the slide decks, and learn from either the factory or back to HVAC Basics 101. How are you guys changing that with the thought of people don't consume information like that anymore, or they don't have time for that anymore?
Yeah. So I think, what we've seen is there's actually a lot of people who want to get into the trades, right? So there's a stigma. Yes, our schools aren't doing a great job steering people into the trades and are pushing people to college. But on our platform, we kind of see the front lines. We see thousands of people who want to get into the trades and who really want those jobs. But there's an access problem. Right now, if you want to go into the trades, or for many years, it's been your only option is really traditional trade school, which requires leaving the workforce or leaving school, leaving a income generating role for a year, 2 years, going to school full time, and spending a lot of money. And these are a lot of people who just aren't necessarily good at traditional academic school. Like, it's one of the reasons they want to explore other roles, which are, use different types of intelligence. And so you're seeing a lot of people just getting left out, right? And this is, fresh grads, new young people, but it's also people who've worked years in other industries or other trades who just haven't had the opportunity, or no one's really given them a great way to reskill for other industries. So at SkillCat, we built out a platform. It's a mobile app and online platform with about 1,500 hours of simulation-based training and certifications focused on the skilled trades. And so folks can come in with any level of experience from any industry, go through training, get recertified and retrained, and then get a job and find a job at a company that'll then give them an apprenticeship. And then they can continue learning through SkillCat as they're actually doing hands-on on-the-job training. So it's really just a different pipeline where you can leverage online and digital to make that path a lot easier for people.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic. You use the word reskill, and I don't think I've heard many people say that in a context like changing careers and changing focus. What is it that inspired you to kind of flip the whole approach on its head? I mean, this isn't how we've trained the trades. Just like you said, it's not trade school anymore. It's reskilling people in a way that they can pivot in a big way.
Yeah. So my background, so in college I did policy research my senior year on the BP oil spill. And training was one of the biggest issues that caused that spill. And so built out a company right out of college with online courses and simulation training for oil and gas workers. And I ran that for 4 years. That grew quite a bit. Went to business school. When I came back out to the business, it was COVID. And so everyone in oil and gas was getting laid off. And so you had folks going from these, 6-figure, some people making 300, 400K a year, to then working at grocery stores because they didn't know what other industries needed mechanical skills, needed electrical skills. Like, where else could they go and how do you get there? And so that's where I came up with this idea is, hey, what if you make a cleaner, easier path that supports people who may not be able to go full time to an in-person hands-on school for multiple years. And so that's kind of how SkillCat was born, was, hey, how do you make this really accessible, easy, and convenient? And then we've just grown a lot since then. But I think at the heart of it is this realization that since the 70s, like, real income for blue collar folks, so like men without a college degree, which is a good it's a good proxy for kind of the blue collar world, it's gone down by 30% since the 70s because people have lost jobs. Yeah, people have lost jobs in industries like coal and manufacturing, and they haven't found another industry. They moved into lower skilled labor or just left the workforce completely. And so there's a huge need and a huge opportunity in reskilling. So that's where I see, at least one of the biggest sources to solve the skilled trade shortage is helping people more effectively move between industries.
Yeah, bridging that gap between industries that's an interesting take on it. I love that. What would you say is really one of the bigger misconceptions about how we train younger technicians versus older technicians? Is there a misconception there that we can unpack a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think there's an assumption that most people who use SkillCat or who want to learn online are young people. But we actually, we did a survey. Like, we have a good group of young people. We have a lot of people in their 40s, 50s, 60s. We have some users even in their 70s or 80s sometimes. I think like there was a time period where technology was scary to people who are older. But if you look at it, even someone in their 70s, they've been dealing with technology for like 30, 40 years, right? Like we've had computers for a long time. We've had the internet for a long time. We've even had cell phones for like 20 plus years, right? So most people of all ages are really familiar with technology. And often like things like your mobile phone are a lot easier for people to use than a lot of other like the simplicity of a mobile app is often a lot easier than a computer, especially for older people. So we've seen all across the board people gravitating towards technology and e-learning, right? It's no longer something just for young people. I think that ship has sailed.
That's interesting. So if we look at mobile-based training, how does that fit into really what licensing requirements? There's a pretty scattered across the country. I think there's only 14 states you can operate without a license. How do you overcome that from a learning standpoint to get people ready to go get licensed? Or is it a shift away from licensing and into something else?
Yeah, a couple of pieces to that question. So we offer EPA 608 certification through our platform, and to actually get started in like HVAC, for example, all you really need is your EPA, right? So you need one person at your company who has an official license, but at least for HVAC, if you want to join a company, you can join with just your EPA and you can start working on refrigerant and start working in the field. I think our first push and our first focus is really getting people into the industry and then giving them training that supports them as they're actually learning through those first 4 years on the job. We've started looking into license training, and I think it's just a project. Each state is different, and you have to create training and the structure for each state. So we're working on that. But to get someone into a job and starting to work and even starting to bring a tremendous amount of value, you don't need a traditional license. I do think one of the things we're looking at, we built out this new nonprofit called the Grit Foundation. And we're bringing more kids into the skilled trades, but one of our longer term visions is building out a better accreditation standard for HVAC and for other trades that, number one, lets people reskill more effectively. So that gets employers to trust that, hey, you have mechanical skills from another industry, but we validated your mechanical skills so we can trust them. And then also creating some more hands-on components to that assessment, where we're building out assessment centers in different parts of the country so that people can actually come into a physical center to get assessed, versus a lot of existing licenses and existing certifications are primarily tests, but these are really hands-on skills, right? So what we really want is some level of hands-on assessment.
Yeah, it's hard to judge a guy's ability to braze on a piece of paper. So
yeah, I mean, you get like, so you see it all the time. You see these mechanical aptitude tests that people give folks, and it's like, how does a pulley work with like complex pulley diagram? You're not assessing engineers. You're assessing people who are actually in the field, who work with their hands and can figure these things out by like look and touch and feel. And so that's one of the things we're working towards, is that accreditation standard. So
that's interesting. Do you think it provides a one size fits all for states to lean on later in life if we get to a point of needing more licensed individuals?
This a new standard?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think licensing is interesting, but often it's based on text and like code, right? It's not
Right.
always based on what you can actually do, right? So there's a big disconnect there, right? I mean, it's still important to understand code, but it's also important to actually know how to do the job.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I would overemphasize it's more important to know how to do the job.
Yeah.
Licensing ultimately just creates a barrier to entry for a lot of people. So
Yeah.
awesome. So how do you handle really, are you getting any resistance from the industries from a trades perspective as a whole? And how do you handle that from a marketing and communication standpoint to plow ahead?
Honestly, we've gotten a lot of positive reactions. I think some of the so I'll put it this way. I think tradespeople are not from the industry and from companies, we've gotten very positive reactions. Individual tradespeople are very honest with their feedback, right? I think
Oh yeah.
nobody's shy about sharing what they think. And so when we first launched SkillCat, we were actually for a while ranked 1 star, 1.3 stars in the Play Store and in the App Store. And people were brutal, right? There was a lot of feedback on our content, on the experience, and we've worked on that, right? So I think for us, all feedback is truly a gift, and we want to ultimately be an app built by technicians for technicians that helps tradespeople really achieve their highest potential. So we're 4.9 stars in the App Store and Play Store, and whenever we get negative feedback, we dive in, right? So we're in the process of revamping our entire kind of HVAC trade school we built in the app because we've gotten a lot of feedback to make the courses more applied. And so we're in the process of doing that right now. And so I think we consider it kind of constant improvement. And what we care about is the end user, right? So if there are industry, organizations or vested interests that don't like what we're doing, but our end user, the actual tradesperson, is happy, that's what we're focused on. And I think the rest of the industry will come.
That's awesome. So when I start to think about that technician in the field, the storyline, he pulls up to Mrs. Jones's house, he diagnoses a problem. There's a big gap today that we see on our side with what does he do next, right? He needs to understand how to go buy a part, how to quickly procure it. There's some probably future dispatching involved. A lot of business mechanics from a contracting standpoint start to fall into place. So is SkillCat able to do anything to affect that today through partnerships or access to information that didn't exist before? Because I think that's the big thing we see, right? It's where's the information and how do you translate it?
Yeah, we offer some repositories of manuals and error codes, but I think we could do a lot more. And this is where we're excited to be chatting with Encompass. And I think there's a lot of potential of, I think what we have right now is access, right? So we have a tremendous number of tradespeople on the platform, and we're growing like crazy every day. And we're $10 a month, an easy, accessible solution. And so we reach a huge percentage of the industry. And so working together with a group like Encompass or distributors is a really cool way to start leveraging our community and supporting them in more and more ways.
Yeah, for sure. If you had to pinpoint like 3 different nodes of opportunity to improve efficiency in the trade, where would you point today based on the feedback you're getting from your users?
Interesting question. Well, I think we're definitely kind of focused on people, right? Where our people are our challenge, and so I think assessments, right? So how do you effectively assess a new technician you're looking at hiring? I think onboarding, right? So how do you have the most effective program to onboard someone new where they can learn as much as efficiently as possible? And then retention. I think a lot of companies are focused on efficiency and productivity. One of the biggest issues is a lot of companies have terrible retention for technicians, where you have 50% plus leaving within the first 6 months to a year, and it's really hard to get. Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Like that's a big number, and that would be a big black hole in a balance sheet or just financials for a contractor in general. If he's got to constantly onboard and train, what's the symptom there that needs to be addressed? I mean, that's a big number.
Yeah. So I think we've seen a couple of things. This is why a lot of companies like hiring experienced techs, because in theory, those people come in and know what they're going to get. But I think that I alluded to assessment. So having a better process and setup to validate that folks coming in already know what the job is going to entail, know some of the challenges, and kind of have the basic aptitudes to do well in the role. And then career path. So a lot of people come in, they're making entry-level pay, and they're never given any guidance on how to get to that next level of cash and what it takes to get there. And so one of the things we try to do for companies is give people a clear career path of, hey, you go through this training, you show an ability in the field to be able to do these types of skills, then you're going to actually make this pay increase. And so, because otherwise, a lot of times entry level pay for these roles is below what you might get at Walmart, and you're expected to grow, well over that amount over time as you build up more skills. So they have to show that to people and like walk them through that and give them a clear path as to when and how they're going to grow to that next level.
Yeah, I think that's got to be super impactful to the businesses that you're partnering with on the contractor side. Because yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Assessment. Can they get work done? Can they be a good mechanic? Training and onboarding. Can they work within the processes and get the job done the way that the contractors designed it? Both of those translate to fewer callbacks, right? First job fix is a ultimate desire, but that really is just a translation into consumer goodwill. Like how do you create goodwill with the consumer and trust in that brand? So yeah, which I'm sure circles back to your third point, which is retention. If the company's desired, if the technicians are desired, then people are leaning into those softer skills that retention becomes the long-term goal. Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the things you've been seeing at Encompass as some of the biggest challenges for the industry?
Yeah, our general thesis has been pretty consistent for the past couple of years. It's access to repair parts on a aggregated scale. So, if you look back over the last 30 years in HVAC specifically, we've already had a very fragmented market. You got 5 or 6 different distributors in a market to get the day's job done. That results in having 5 or 6 different credit lines as a contractor. That over fragmented process from a business standpoint has its downstream effects in the business. So you've got to consider information and data, simplified process, and how do you get product to technicians quickly and consistently in a way that can create somewhat predictability. I think one of the biggest things that we see as a challenge is, especially post-COVID, the constraints on supply have created this unpredictable nature of, hey, I don't know if I'll have it tomorrow or if I'll have it 2 weeks from, tomorrow. So that has its trickle down effect to the consumer trust in the brand with that contractor, right? They have to live in that ambiguous space for the next week or two. Mrs. Jones doesn't know if she's taking off tomorrow or if she's taking off 2 weeks from now to meet that technician back at the house. So it creates a sense of urgency that's, foreign to most technicians and salespeople, that they have to go out and fix something that, comes with a lot of stress. So our ability to remove that at Encompass is really just, hey, let's bring all the repair parts into one space. Let's make sure they're all genuine OEM parts so we're not guessing about a cross-reference. Let's make sure we put them in markets that are on great, delivery channels for big carriers so we can get it to technicians in 24 hours or less. You start to build math around, predictable delivery. And now all of a sudden it's got that same, mindset shift like Amazon brought to us of saying, hey, we'll get it to your doorstep in 2 days. All right, well, good. Now I don't have to go to Target and Walmart. I can just wait and figure out something else to do with my time to be more productive. As we see the shift from, the skilled trades and maybe a depleting workforce, our ability to affect procurement and scheduling so that good technicians and good contractors that are doing quality work can get more jobs on the board that week. That's what we want to affect. So
very cool.
Awesome. Well, I think we're about 30 minutes in, so I'm going to say this last big bullet question. Anything else that you want to leave the world with as we're talking to contractors and we're talking to really consumers and OEMs? Any big call outs that they need to be aware of as we look at the shift and how this industry is changing over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I encourage any contractor to really build out a pipeline for apprentices, right? If you're a contractor focused on growth in any meaningful way, you're going to have to start hiring people who are new to the industry, right? It's not sufficient to just look for experienced techs anymore. And there's a lot of really bright, thoughtful people out there. Often they have great mechanical and electrical skills and can really crush it at a role. So, um, yeah, I would encourage you to work with a company like SkillCat, or there's a couple other great companies out there, and build out a clear pipeline for apprenticeship recruitment, training, and growth. And it'll be some work upfront, but you won't regret it.
That's a great call out. When I look at apprenticeship programs today, I think one of the biggest challenges that I see is, they're looking for people that already have a resume full of skills, and not a blank slate. So if you were coaching them on how to recruit for that, what would you tell them to look for?
So I think definitely value previous experience in other trades. Um, we've started having our students build up portfolios of actual hands-on tasks that they've done either at home, or using kits that we're starting to send out. So look for evidence of hands-on skill. Um,
Does that also include having gone to a Git or Grit workshop with your nonprofit?
yes, that would. Yes, yes, absolutely. It's still great. It's still for middle schoolers right now, but yeah, if you want someone who's I think our oldest kids are 17, so I think some of the older kids are probably a good fit. But we're still on the younger end for grit right now. So.
Hey, maybe that's a good call out. What would you give as advice to maybe a middle schooler or a high schooler who might want to get into the trades and be part of one of these apprenticeship programs that are being built out? What would be a good way for them to start really building a resume or a portfolio to get in?
Well, I just start working with your hands, right? There's so much stuff around your house that you can do, right? And so we're going to actually build out as a post-grit camp course for students to actually get hands-on experience around their home. The Boy Scouts actually has they have a badge associated with hands-on work. And I mean, there's so much you can do just with like, change a tire, right? Assemble furniture, do preventative maintenance on your appliances, right? There's a ton of different things out there that you can start doing, and I would start getting your hands dirty and start fixing things and just getting out there. And then if you really do want to get an internship or start working at a contractor, just go show up, bright-eyed with maybe a can-do attitude, and someone will give you a shot. I think that's the best way to get a job, especially when you're a kid.
That's great advice. Moms and dads out there, let your son or daughter take apart the dishwasher or dryer and washing machine this week. That'll be good practice. But no, I think showing up to the contractor and say, hey, put me to work, as a method of learning, that's a great call out. So awesome. Well, Ruchir, it's been awesome having you on the show this week. We're excited to see what SkillCat is doing. I think you guys are helping to close that generational divide of how we train technicians in the future, and hopefully helping to improve the economics of the industry as it goes. So thank you for what you're doing. Keep it up. Pleasure to have you.
Absolutely. Thanks.